Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into a topic today that I think you're going to find, well, pretty fascinating.
It definitely has me hooked.
Yeah, we're talking about food, but with a twist. We're digging into the world of underutilized crops. You know, those hidden gems of the culinary world that have the potential to shake things up.
And maybe even change how we think about food entirely.
Exactly. And to help us unpack all of this, we're taking a deep dive into research from the BioValue Project.
They've been doing some really interesting work in this area, looking at what these crops are, how people feel about them, and even how to market them.
Right, so it's like a 360-degree view of the potential of these underutilized crops.
Exactly. It's not just about identifying them, but about understanding how to actually integrate them into our food system in a way that makes sense for everyone.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What are we actually talking about when we say underutilized crops?
So these are essentially crops that were once more widely consumed. They have a history, but for whatever reason have fallen out of favor.
Ah, like forgotten foods.
Precisely. And what's interesting is that many of them have incredible nutritional value, are resilient to climate change, and offer all sorts of culinary possibilities.
It's like they're these hidden treasures just waiting to be rediscovered.
Exactly. And one of the things that struck me when I was reading this research was the sheer diversity of these crops.
Oh, yeah. Like what kind of things are we talking about?
Well, take sonkus, for example.
Sonkus.
Yeah, it's this leafy green, kind of has a tangy flavor, and it was actually really popular back in ancient Rome.
Wow. You know, I pride myself on being a bit of a foodie, and even I have never heard of that one.
See? It's a perfect example. And then you've got things like grass peas, super high in protein and can grow in really tough conditions.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those. Aren't they also called chickling peas sometimes?
That's right. And then, of course, you've got the dandelion.
Wait, dandelions? As in the weeds I'm always trying to get rid of in my garden.
The very same. But what most people don't realize is that they're completely edible, actually really nutritious, and can be used in everything from salads to teas.
Wow, I had no idea. So we've got all these incredible crops with fascinating histories and amazing potential.
And the BioValue Project actually took things a step further.
Oh, how so?
They didn't just identify these crops, they actually turned them into real food products and tested them out on consumers.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So they wanted to see how people would react to them in the real world, not just in theory.
Exactly. And they found that people are more open to trying these unusual ingredients than you might think, especially when they're presented in a way that's familiar and appealing.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, they made this red lentil brownie that was a huge hit.
A red lentil brownie. Now that's just genius.
Right. It's familiar, it's comforting, but it also has this interesting twist.
I love that. So it's about taking something people already know and love and giving it a little upgrade.
Exactly. And the research suggests that this is a really effective way to introduce people to new flavors and ingredients.
Makes sense. So we've got these amazing underutilized crops. We've got researchers turning them into delicious creations. But what about the most important factor, the consumer? What are their thoughts on all of this?
Well, the BioValue Project uncovered some pretty interesting insights there as well, and it all boils down to two key factors: health and taste.
Which, when you think about it, makes perfect sense. We want food that's good for us and that we actually enjoy eating.
Precisely. And they really dug deep into this through sensory testing.
Like getting people to actually taste things.
Oh, yeah, with real products. They wanted to get a genuine feel for what consumers thought about the flavors, the textures, the whole experience of eating these foods.
Now that's what I call getting your hands dirty. Or should I say your taste buds tingling.
Exactly. And it's through these real-world taste tests that the true potential of these underutilized crops starts to shine through.
So they had actual products for people to try, huh? What did they learn from all that?
Well, remember those chickpea and grass pea flour crackers we talked about earlier? Turns out those were a bit polarizing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some people were really intrigued by them, thought they were interesting, but others just weren't sold on the flavor or the texture.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I mean, taste is so subjective, right? What one person loves, another might not even want to try.
Exactly. And that's a crucial thing to remember when you're talking about introducing these kinds of crops to a wider audience. It's not enough for a food to just be healthy or sustainable. It's got to taste good, too.
Absolutely. You got to want to eat it.
Precisely. So it's really about the whole sensory experience, not just the ingredients themselves.
Okay, I'm curious. What about the buckwheat pasta? How'd that go over?
That one was actually really interesting. A lot of people saw it as a good alternative to regular pasta, especially those who are trying to avoid gluten.
Right. Buckwheat's naturally gluten-free, isn't it?
It is. So for people with dietary restrictions, it's a great option. But just like with those crackers, the taste sparked some debate. Some people loved the sort of earthy, nutty flavor, but others found it a bit too strong.
Yeah, buckwheat definitely has a distinct taste. I can see how some people might not be into it. So it seems like there's this theme emerging. These crops have huge potential, but it all comes back to taste.
Absolutely. And that's where the BioValue project gets really interesting. They didn't just stop at understanding these consumer perceptions. They dug into the best strategies for actually marketing these crops.
Okay, so we've got these amazing underutilized crops, tons of potential, and we know consumers are driven by taste and health. How do we bridge that gap? How do we get these things on more plates?
Think of it like releasing a hit song.
Okay.
You need a catchy melody, good lyrics, and a plan to get it heard right. With these crops, it's the same idea, but instead of music, we're talking about the 4 Ps of marketing: product, price, distribution, and communication.
Okay, I like it. Break it down for me. What are the 4 Ps all about in this context?
All right, so let's start with product. You've got to create something people actually want. Remember that red lentil brownie we talked about? That's a perfect example of a smart product strategy. They took something familiar, something people already love, brownies, and gave it a nutritious twist.
Right. It's like sneaking vegetables into a smoothie. You get all the goodness without sacrificing the flavor.
Exactly. It's about finding those clever ways to make these sometimes unfamiliar crops appealing and delicious.
So familiarity is key.
It's a great starting point. But then you can highlight the unique qualities of the crops themselves, too.
Like what?
Well, many of these crops are nutritional powerhouses. They're packed with vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, you name it. Emphasizing those benefits is huge, especially with health-conscious consumers.
It's like they're superheroes disguised as ordinary plants.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of a good story. Connecting these crops to local cuisines, talking about their history and the people who grow them, that all adds to their appeal.
Oh, I love that. It's like giving the food a soul.
Exactly. You want people to connect with it on an emotional level, not just see it as another ingredient.
Okay, product, check. What about price? How do you make these products accessible, but also make sure they're valued appropriately?
Price is always tricky. But remember, people are often willing to pay a premium for something if they understand its value.
So it's about more than just the number on the price tag.
Right. Transparency is key. If people understand why something costs a bit more, whether it's because of sustainable farming practices, fair trade sourcing, or even just superior taste, they're more likely to accept that price.
It's about telling the whole story, right?
Exactly. Okay, so we've got product and price covered. Now let's talk about distribution. Where do you make these products available? Think diverse. Specialty stores, farmers markets, online platforms, these are all great places to start. You're reaching consumers who are already a bit more adventurous with their food choices.
Right, they're already looking for something unique, something different.
Precisely. But don't rule out mainstream supermarkets either. As demand grows, we're seeing more and more of these larger retailers embracing these kinds of products.
That's great. So it's about making them accessible to everyone, no matter where they shop. Okay, we've covered product, price, distribution. What about our final P? Communication. How do you get people excited about these often overlooked ingredients? This is where it all comes together, right?
It really is.
I mean, you can have an incredible product at the perfect price point, available everywhere.
Right.
But if you don't get the messaging right.
Exactly. It's all for nothing if you can't communicate the value of these crops to the consumer.
Okay, so spill the beans. What makes for a winning communication strategy when it comes to these underutilized superstars?
Well, at the end of the day, people connect with stories, so don't just hit them over the head with a bunch of facts and figures about nutritional content.
Right.
Weave those benefits into a compelling narrative.
I like it. So how do you do that?
Think about the unique flavors of these crops, their fascinating histories, the dedicated farmers who grow them.
Right. Bring those stories to life.
Exactly. And don't forget about the environmental angle. Choosing these crops can have a real impact on the planet, so make sure you're highlighting those benefits too.
So it's about painting the bigger picture.
Absolutely. It's about showing people that their food choices matter and that by choosing these underutilized crops, they're not just expanding their culinary horizons.
Right.
They're becoming part of something bigger, something that's good for them, good for the planet.
I love that. So it's not just about what we eat, but why we eat it.
Exactly. And the best part is you can get really creative with how you communicate all of this. Think chef partnerships, cooking demonstrations, social media campaigns, anything that gets people engaged and excited about these ingredients.
Creating a movement.
Precisely. Because ultimately, that's what it's all about, right? Shifting the conversation around food, expanding our definition of what's delicious, and creating a more sustainable and resilient food system for everyone.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about why you, our listeners.
Yes, this is where it gets really exciting.
Have you ever tried any of these underutilized crops we've been talking about? Maybe you've stumbled upon a dish at a restaurant or discovered a hidden gem at a farmer's market.
Or maybe this conversation has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to seek out some of these ingredients for the first time.
Because here's the thing, as consumers, we have so much power.
We really do.
Our choices, the
Yeah.
foods we buy, the dishes we cook, they all send a message.
And by choosing to explore the world of underutilized crops, we're not just expanding our own palates, we're sending a message to the market that we want to see more of these ingredients, more of this kind of innovation in our food system.
We're casting a vote for a more diverse, delicious, and sustainable future.
Exactly. It all comes down to making conscious choices.
And being open to trying new things.
Absolutely. You never know, you might just discover your new favorite food.
That's a wrap for today's deep dive into the fascinating world of underutilized crops.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've enjoyed this journey into the delicious possibilities of these often overlooked ingredients.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Until then, happy eating.